Welcome to the Worship Leader Toolbox podcast, where our mission is to equip and encourage worship leaders and teams and practical components of local church leadership. We're so thrilled to have you listening to our podcast, and our prayer is that it's helpful for you and your teams. If you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to reach out to us at worshipleadertoolbox.com, and we'd also be honored to have you hit subscribe wherever you're listening to us. Heading now to today's episode with Tim Price.
Well, I'm so glad you're here on the podcast today for worship leaders. My name is Tim Price, and I want to talk today about things worship leaders could delegate. This podcast is really a brainstorm because there's a lot of different ways that you could delegate depending on the situation of your church, the style, the number of people in your team, the number of people in your church staff. But I want us to be thinking about how we can invite others in. This is partly for the purpose of making sure that we keep space in our ministries, not to be so inundated with the day in and day out, the whirlwind of all the details for the weekend, that we miss the opportunity to vision and dream and think and allow God's Spirit to help in leading and in serving the church the best way. But it's also because we don't want to rob people of using their gifts. One of the best things we can do for our church is to help raise up several experts so that somebody, when our time comes to transition out, knows how to step up and lead, knows how to deal with the frameworks and planning center and pro-presenter and all that happen whenever you're working in worship ministry and helping the church lift up the name of the Lord. So right off the bat, many of us might dismiss this post or podcast. You can visit the post actually and see these ideas at worshipleadertoolbox.com. But we might dismiss it because we might immediately think we have no one to delegate to. You might get into a scarcity mindset of thinking you're not a big church, or it's just you, or you're just a volunteer, or any number of sentences where you throw in the word just and limit what God can do through you and the people that you have currently working there with you. But you'll be surprised who in your church could respond to joining you in ministry through delegating something that might be helpful for them to use their gifts and for you to allow them to take part. And if it's not somebody within your church directly, it could be somebody in your circles. It could even be some sort of internet paid services of people who are out there doing short-term projects or virtual assisting for even the smallest of things. So people probably aren't coming up to you, knocking on your door, asking you to delegate something to them. This requires a little bit of emphasis and intentionality on your part. You have to create the right frameworks. But once you do, you have the opportunity to build a team of leaders to work around you to make things more effective. Now, when I say you can build the frameworks, I'll just give you one small example of that because this doesn't have to be huge, corporate scale workflow charts or anything like that. This can just be as simple as thinking of something that you do on a regular basis, a weekly basis, something that you could easily write down the 3 or 4 steps that it takes to accomplish this thing. Once you write that down, you can set that on the corner of your desk or your space, put it on the laptop, and you can just wait for God to prompt you with somebody in your circle, in your midst, or in your church that seems like they would be good to ask to join you in helping with a weekly task or a weekly responsibility of being a part of ministry. I did this a number of years back. Probably need to spruce it up a little bit and try it again, but I did this for someone to send notes to people. I did it for about 10 different people to schedule different aspects of the areas I was in charge of in our church. I did it for people who were going to volunteer to help host on Sunday to make sure all the things that I saw from the worship stage while rehearsal was happening, somebody else could actually help take care of those instead of me feeling like I had to split the time. So one of the best ways and things I've ever read on delegation was actually 5 levels of delegation from Michael Hyatt on one of his blog posts several years back. And I'll run through those real quick, but you can read the whole post on a link I have at worshipleadertoolbox.com. But from Michael Hyatt, as a leader, whenever you delegate a task, you need to make it clear what level of authority you are conferring on others, which is a big part of delegating, that you're inviting people in. For some, this level of delegation is pretty minor and simple. For others, you're really inviting them to become part of your team, your right-hand person. So level 1, do as I say. This means to basically do precisely what I tell you to do. Don't deviate from the instruction. Level 2, research and report. This means taking a little bit of initiative to research the topic, gather some information, and report what you discover. Then this person who's delegating can decide what to do. Level 3, research and recommend. This means that they take a minute to check out the topic, check out the issue, check out the situation, and present their recommendation. And then you meet together and determine what to do. Level 4 is decide and inform. After these other levels have kind of been through the process, then they can decide that they take on an issue, take on a situation, they make a decision, and then they basically let you know what happened with the situation. And that way you're in the loop, but you're not necessarily dealing with the everyday stuff. And then level 5, the final one, is to act independently. This means making the best decision, and the person who has been delegating trusts the person completely. So we can definitely do that with various things. Pushback is often it takes so much work to delegate. It is true, and there's no way around it. You basically have to be motivated and inspired to determine and decide that you are going to work with people, that you're going to delegate for the purpose of growing the kingdom ministry. And that's going to require some work on the front end. It's going to require some ongoing kind of connections. But the other side is a world of freedom, a world of team around you, a world of people who are helping to take on without necessarily coming to you for everything. So there isn't a bottleneck, but there's a seamless kind of leadership structure so that people can plug in and easily get involved. So the rest of this podcast is just a quick brainstorm that I did of things that you might delegate in your own ministry. So let me just share some of these. I don't know if I'll have thoughts about each as I look through this long list here. I won't be able to share thoughts about all of them, but here's a few. Scheduling team members. I've tried this a number of different ways. I've had department heads, sort of like the electric guitar guy scheduling other electrics, or the drummer scheduling the 4 rotation of drummers. And the less people you have to schedule, the more personal it can be, the more tailored it can be to their calendar and their life. At other times, I've had somebody just oversee the whole band schedule, which does require some care because the chemistry is important in music, and we all know that. So it takes a little bit of gumption to know. And that has been in and out over the season. Sometimes I have, sometimes somebody else has. Creating chord charts is a huge one I don't like to do very much. And it's a reminder to me that somebody out there loves to do the things that you don't like to do. So just because you don't like to do them doesn't mean nobody will. In fact, somebody would love it. So you can't kind of put your own spin on some task and say, nobody will do this, I'm just going to grind through it. Being a worship team host on Sundays, this has been an awesome step that we took and has grown. And almost every Sunday morning, there's somebody there to help make sure communion's out when it needs to be, and new members know where to go, and the kids choirs know where to go, and all the people that are around helping with hospitality and all kinds of other areas just kind of know what needs to happen when. Leading the prayer circle before worship. This is something that you could delegate this Sunday. All you have to do is just mention to somebody as you're walking toward the back room to say, hey, would you mind praying for us as we begin in worship? And as you do that, you are delegating the opportunity for people to lead. Scheduling the devotion leaders for rehearsals. If you have time during a rehearsal to share some scripture or a testimony or devotion, you can have somebody just schedule those people, just to put them in planning center as the rehearsal devotion leader. Doesn't have to be long. It can be a perfect setup for people to get their feet wet leading in that way. Entry of lyrics into ProPresenter. I have entered lyrics into ProPresenter maybe 2 or 3 times in my worship leading time for the church. For the most part, the times I enter lyrics into ProPresenter is for our traveling ministry, but I have always been thankful for the opportunity to engage and involve and recruit people to serve in the area of ProPresenter. The number of people who know it and can do it and can insert lyrics takes a little bit to learn it, but it is a major gift to the worship leader for somebody in the church to take on that role. Sound and tech setup before rehearsal. It's a huge thing to delegate. Backstage organization is an awesome thing to delegate. Sometimes it's a little difficult because some people just don't know what to do with this and that, but just keeping it tidy is powerful. Creating clicks and tracks. Anytime we've used Ableton, I've actually never done Ableton, but I've used it hundreds of times, and other people have been involved in creating that. And so I'm thankful for God sending those people, experts, to take care of that. Working with vocalists. That can be a key vocalist, or maybe it's just somebody else who's great at vocal coaching or leading. You just delegate the task of helping the vocalist learn songs. I've even experienced in our own ministry and seen other churches who meet with the vocals at the start of rehearsal, the band's separate, and then come together for the final 45 minutes to put it all together. Planning snacks for worship team gatherings and meetings. There's a lot of people who will step in to do that in your church. Worship service admins, people who get people to the right place. Proofreading publications. Anytime you're about ready to send off an article or a post for your church newsletter, you can just send it to somebody that you've delegated to kind of be the one to gather up that information and make it nice. Creating audio tracks and adding to Planning Center. Planning Center is making this easier and easier, but this is a great thing for somebody to do, to figure out ways to make sure people have the right track and the right key so they can practice at home. Tagging and categorizing songs in Planning Center. I think I said categorizing weird, but when we tag those songs, it just helps us in the long run. This is a kind of an ongoing process, and it's best if you start it when you first start Planning Center, but most of us didn't, and so it might help just having somebody glean through the songs for this week and next week, tag them, categorize them, get them in the right setup so that you can easily search for them. Creating new song flows in Planning Center instead of PDFs or song select. At one point, several Wednesday nights for a couple years, somebody helped me dump our paper catalog into Planning Center, and it was huge help. It was amazing, and it was great to have. Then Planning Center began to morph, and we began to learn more and realized you can create those chord charts right in there very simply, more easily able to change keys, more easily able to edit the flow, and it's a huge gift for somebody to be able to take that on, learn the flow, and do it. Providing food before the worship team meets on Sunday, or I guess I should say before they actually lead on Sunday. The flow at our church is to rehearse and then sit down and have some breakfast or snacks and then basically get ready for church. And that has been going on for 3 or 4 years. Ever since COVID hit, the church stopped serving refreshments and the worship team was still there all morning. So we started a rotation of people who basically bring breakfast, and it's been awesome. You can delegate that scheduling, and it just makes a world of difference. Serving as a team captain, there might be a drummer captain or a guitar captain or a vocal captain. Depending on the size of your team, this is somebody that could just keep track of those 5 or 6 people in that department and just encouraging them, helping make sure people are on. Somebody gets sick, they can help cover all the things that wouldn't bottleneck with just one leader. Taking new song requests and getting them into the system. I'll often get people who will send me a YouTube link and they'll say, hey, we should do this song. I always write back and say, oh, I'll take a listen. Most time I take a listen, but then at times that just kind of falls away. And the reason is because there are so many little steps that have to happen after that. If you could listen to it, determine it's a great song, and fire that off to somebody to say, put this into Planning Center, it would be a huge boost to your ministry and new songs. Social media for the worship team is something you can easily delegate. We have a worship leader and worship team and tech team Facebook group just for our church. Just 45 or 50 people in this group, but it's a great place to add photos and to say thanks and to talk about ideas. And you can actually delegate somebody to be the instigator of that, the keeper going of it. And maybe you have a worship page on Facebook or Instagram for your whole ministry. And if that's the case, delegate that too. Onboarding processes for new team members. You definitely want to be involved in this as the worship leader, but there's a lot of aspects that can be handled by somebody who could take on the role of gathering information, making sure you stay connected with them, firing off the email that says, hey, answer these questions or tell us a little bit about yourself or whatever the case is. And then just to stay connected to them, find out how it's going and how things are working as they begin to join and assimilate into the ministry. Finding new songs for the church, I already mentioned a little bit of that. Helping to lead the high school or middle school worship team, that's a huge aspect if you have those groups in your church. It's a great feeder into the system of adult worship teams in your church, but also just for the sake of the whole church in general. All these middle school and high school students learning the art and then moving off to college and serving in worship bands or taking part in the church or something like that. You can delegate arranging a mission experience for the team. The whole worship and tech team, when you work together outside of the typical on-the-clock Sunday morning, getting ready for music at worship, is something that can really build togetherness and community in your group. I remember one distinct time we all drove about an hour away, helped paint a school for a children's home. Setting up a Christmas caroling event for the worship team. It's another thing you could delegate to somebody. You can also delegate the idea of just setting up a Christmas party, and we have done both of those. Scheduling those who help serve communion or read scripture in worship. Maybe that's not your role in your particular setting, but if it is, any of those side things that you are in charge of, recruiting people and scheduling them on Planning Center, you can invite people to do that. And I've done that for all kinds of areas, especially scripture reading and communion servers. At one point at our 4 Sunday morning services, we would have the communion prep team, which was usually a couple, and then we would have 2 different sets of people serving communion at all 4 different services. And so it was a whirlwind of scheduling, getting all those people together. And so I just was able to, by the grace of God, invite some people to help learn that, to delegate that system, and they scheduled all those people. And it was a really freeing thing. Leading worship some week and you're not in town. That seems like a big delegation, but if you're not doing that on a regular basis, then it's going to be hard for you to ever step away. So you want to find ways at times to be gone or to not lead at least a few Sundays a year. Introduce a song or praying during worship. Again, this seems so simple, but delegating this in advance, letting somebody know that they can take part in helping to lead the way. They don't just have to hold the mic and only sing when you're singing. Taking photos of your ministry team and worship events. This is an awesome way just to celebrate, to say thanks to your team, to put out great pictures from the Sunday morning worship or great little shorts or videos or reels. So people just get a little glimpse of what's going on in your congregation. But also for the people who volunteer to serve with you each week. It's just to boost their participation and a way to say thanks, just to tag them on social media. Totally free way. And if you can delegate that aspect, even once a month, somebody come in and do that. So that's my list, and thanks for listening. What else do you delegate? I would love to hear that. Hear what kinds of things you set up for people in your church to join you in ministry. And if nothing else, one thing that I think the overarching idea of delegating responsibilities and recruiting people to be a part of the team with you, the thing I've learned most is if you do that out of a desperate need, like, oh man, I can't get this done and I don't like doing it and my whole life's falling apart. If you have that kind of desperation aspect to it, it takes away the opportunity for people to use their gifts. It shifts them into filling a slot or a warm body or a duty that they have to do. But if you have healthy aspect to ministry in terms of, I want people to be involved, I want to give people opportunities, these people are part of the team, they've committed, these people are church members, they're involved, they've already said yes to investing part of their time in their life to doing things that are going to advance the kingdom. When you come at it with that approach, it's going to be a breath of fresh air for people. They might say no still, and that's totally fine, but you just keep asking, keep inviting until you are able to develop people to take on some of these roles that can easily be done by someone else. Well, I want to encourage you to continue on. Thank you for your ministry. Thanks for listening to our podcast. We'd love to have you visit worshipleadertoolbox.com. The day of this podcast is out, we'll have a question hopefully on the Worship Leader Toolbox community Facebook group. You can join that and join the conversation.
Thanks again for joining us. If you have any questions, you can find out more about our ministry by going to worshipleadertoolbox.com. You can also take a quick moment to request access to the Facebook community Worship Leader Toolbox. We'd love to connect there and have you connect with others. As a reminder, we try and share a new podcast episode 2 times a month, most often on Thursday, and we look forward to joining with you next time.